To get into the best universities abroad, we have with us Mr. Rakshit Naidu, pursuing his Masters in Information Technology at Carnegie Mellon University, USA, and is also a research engineer at OpenMind. He has been a diligent student throughout, and after completing his schooling from the prestigious Rishi Valley School, he went on to do his undergrad in computer science at Manipal Institute of Technology and graduated from there in 2021. His dedication and keen interest in research has led him to one of the top research universities in the US. Today, he will be walking us through his amazing journey to CMU, and in addition to that, he will also be giving us some powerful insights on how to get into a top master's program. So, without much delay, I welcome Mr. Rakshit Naidu, our guest speaker for this evening. We would like to express our heartfelt gratitude for your presence with us today, sir. Now, I would like to hand over the session to you. But before that, a quick announcement for our audience today. In case you have any questions in your mind during the session, please feel free to drop them in the chat box so that our speaker can address them in the Q&A session later. Sir, will you take over?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you for the warm welcome, and I'm quite excited to be here. And so let me just start sharing my screen. Um, okay. Okay. So yeah, I'll be talking about higher studies today, and um, so what exactly is it, and what kind of options do you have? So higher studies can be divided into two categories, that is masters and PhD. And a lot of people want to do a PhD, but it's really very competitive. And in order to do a PhD, here I classify both of them into two different categories, and you can actually pursue your masters right after your bachelor's, and even for a PhD, you can apply for it after your bachelor's, and you can also apply for it after your master's as well. But it's a really competitive process, and um, yeah, getting a PhD position that's fully funded is very um, yeah, it's very hard. And for masters, you also have to incur a heavy investment. That is, in order to go for very prestigious colleges, private universities, especially like the Ivy Leagues, and uh, even the university I'm studying in, it takes a lot of money, and yeah, a lot of people have to take loans um, in order to cover those expenses, and including me. And for a PhD, you actually get paid to study, which is why it's very competitive, and you actually get some kind of you get a remuneration for every month that actually covers your living expenses and all the other expenses that you want to do in your city. And a master's program is usually a 1 to 2 years program, while a PhD is 5 to 6 years, where you research on your particular interests, and then you try to write a dissertation, and then um, yeah, and then present it to your advisors and whatnot. And sometimes it might be even longer based on where you are in that particular dissertation. So let me talk about what's really important when you apply to these colleges. So according to me, the most important thing is your statement of purpose, where you actually want to highlight your interests, and you also want to highlight your motivation, your background, and uh, on why you want to pursue that particular course and what really excites you. You really have to do your research on what kind of professors uh, really really teach there, and what kind of research that they do really excites you, and you really need to highlight those in your SOP. You also want to highlight like a 1 or 2 projects that actually relate to your experience and your background, which could actually help you in the application process. So I would say that your statement of purpose is really important, and it's important to draft it out very carefully, and also apply for a college. Yeah, so the second one is also is getting your letters of recommendation. So many universities recommend LORs for three in total. That is, so mostly people want to take one from the industry and two academic from your professors in your college. And I would suggest you to do the same. And yeah, then the next important part is your academic scores. That's your grades and GPA, because masters and even PhDs are very competitive, and having not good academic scores is also totally okay. Like me, I didn't have a really good score. I had a 7 CGPA, and but I still made it through because I had a really good research background. So you can actually cover that up in your SOP by mentioning your research projects. So that's not an issue. And then the next part is your work experience and your internships. Yeah, I would say that it's very important to highlight such topics, and also if you do have relevant work experience related to your program that you're applying to, it would be really great to mention them in your SOP and also in your resume. And the next part is the extracurricular activities. So if you have um, any any activities that you do apart from your classes, that is, if you join a student club, or if you're involved in your day-to-day activities uh, in any other extra in any other clubs, like sports or something. So that is also really helpful for me. I was involved in field work, so where we had to actually sow the seeds, shovel, and then plant, do some planting and gardening as well in my high school. So that really came into effect. And uh, in my work experience, I didn't do many internships, but I did one internship in a startup in Hyderabad. And I did it on yeah, I had a project that was on speaker identification. And yeah, I used Gaussian mixture models and all that stuff for speaker identification. And I actually took my letters of recommendation from all my professors. So I took all the three of them in total uh, a- a- in academics. So my professors were willing to send my LORs, and um, they really helped me a lot. So yeah, there are also other aspects that I haven't touched. That is, there could be other um, different factors that can come into play in your application process. So it would be really great to mention, to highlight them as well. So when you have your resume, it's really important that it's formatted well, and even your SOP is also formatted well. So please keep that in mind as well. So yeah, so that's it from me. If you do have any questions on how to draft them up or anything, um, please let me know, and uh, I can try to send some resources on how you can actually draft your SOP, and also try to get a letter of recommendation from your professors and whatnot. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so since you come from such a prestigious university in US, so can you please walk us through your journey from Manipal to CMU? We would be super excited to listen.
Okay. So yeah, in Manipal, I actually wasn't doing very great because during my undergraduate, as you know, the third and fourth semesters are really hard for any computer science student. And because you have data structures and you have so many different courses, like object-oriented programming and databases, and these courses were like really heavy on me, and then I didn't do really well, uh, if you think about it. And um, after that, because I didn't do really well, I had a 6 CG I had a 6 GPA in those uh, in those semesters. So, um, luckily, I was actually quite fortunate that the pandemic hit, because of the pandemic, I actually could spend a lot of time on my research, and that's how I started out. And during the pandemic, I was working a lot on my research, and I tried to get a few publications out there, and I think that really helped me a lot in my SOP and in my application process, because I didn't have really great academic scores, and it's really important to balance them out. And because my academic scores were really bad, I had to make them up with my research, and then um, mention them in my SOP, and that actually helped me a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was really great hearing that. Yeah, so if let us assume that currently a third year undergraduate has just made up his mind to do MS abroad. So, what according to you should he do? Like the first step he should do?
So the first step he should do is he should write those tests. I think there are some standardized tests like GRE and also IELTS or
Yeah.
TOEFL, and those are really important because yeah, I failed to highlight them because I didn't give it during the pandemic. It was kind of optional, so I only gave the IELTS. And GRE is really important because um, a lot of universities actually look at your GRE scores. So it's better to complete that as soon as possible so that you don't have to stress out towards the end. And so I would suggest you to give your GRE as soon as possible, and then based on your scores you can kind of see which university you can try to apply to. And yeah, and then after that you can start drafting your SOPs, and then ask your professors for letters of recommendation and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah, all right. So before we take up the questions from the audience, we already had a poll and we already have some questions ready with us. So I'll be just
Sure.
continuing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So while you were applying for universities, what all did you take into consideration? Like what all parameters did you take into consideration while applying for those universities?
So when I applied for my universities, I actually uh, the first thing that I looked at was what kind of professors teach there, as in do their research interests align with mine? Because I work in security and privacy in machine learning models, and so uh, I wanted to see if there were professors working in this field. I had a look at them, as in which universities they teach at, and does their research really excite me, and other different factors. So this was my first criterion for uh, shortlisting a university. And then the second one would be the location, because if I do take up any college in New York, say Columbia or NYU, I would also be paying a lot of living expenses, because in New York, yeah, the properties are really high. The rental prices are really high, and so that is also the second consideration, because I'm already paying a lot for my master's program. So I really don't want to push it and extend it to um, extend my my budget. So yeah, so that's my second criterion. And then the third one would be, yeah, after setting my location, and um, also the professors, I would also want to see if they are actually collaborative. So I heard that CMU is super collaborative, and then you can actually take courses from any department. So I can take my electives, even though I'm in the CS department. I can take my
Yeah.
electives in the business school, or maybe even in the dance school, or even the drama school as well. So that's really cool, and I can probably collaborate with any person that I can meet. And if I do find people who are interested in a particular idea, I can talk to them and also collaborate with them. So that's a good thing. And
Yes.
Yeah, these three things were really important when I shortlisted this university.
Okay, great. So, what research did you do and what inspired you to do it? Like, and ultimately target a master's program.
Right. So
Yeah.
I started my research with OpenMind. So OpenMind, they had this research engineer program, and I applied for it, and I got in. And so I usually work in the privacy and security side of ML. And what this means is, so there's an idea called differential privacy. So if you have a data set of n records, you and then you try to remove one person from that particular database, then you have n minus one records. You try to query that particular database with n records, and the new data and the new database with n minus one records, and then you try to see how much difference, or how sensitive your query is in particular to that one record. Because that might mean your if you have something like a mean function on that particular data set, uh, the one person that you remove could really affect your mean, and which means that that particular one person has a lot of it's really important to preserve his privacy, because the mean kind of changes a lot, and it's quite sensitive in that sense. So yeah, I'll not bore you with those details. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I work in differential privacy and even federated learning. So yeah, I started out with a project under a PhD student at UPenn, and yeah, we're still working on that project, and
Mhm.
through OpenMind. And yeah, apart from that, I met a lot of people on the OpenMind Slack channel, and they were really willing to help me out with whatever crazy ideas that I had, or maybe even whatever ideas that they had. So that was really helpful.
Right, right. So, what was your most fruitful experience during your time as an undergrad in Manipal?
Um, in Manipal, I would say that yeah, the fruitful experience. Yeah, I didn't really have much, to be honest,
Mm.
on campus. But during the pandemic, I would say that yeah, the pandemic actually quite helped me a lot, because I used to spend like uh, quite a lot of time just doing my own research. uh, and I spent like nearly 16 to 18 hours just every day, spending like running experiments on my laptop and whatnot for my research. And yeah, that was quite fruitful, because that actually helped me to get here. And I also now have like some works on my name. So that was a really great experience as well.
Yeah, right. So, what is your take on CGPA? Yeah, in undergrad.
Okay. So your CGPA doesn't actually play much of a
Mm-hmm.
role. It's like a it's like the first step that people see. So they just have a look at your CGPA. Do you cross that particular threshold? And then they look at it. But it's not like that. But um, yeah, they actually look at a holistic view of your application. So I would say that having a good CGPA always
Right.
benefits you. And
Mm.
yeah, anything above 8 or 8.5 is really good. And
Okay.
even if you have 7, also above 7, it's fine.
Yeah, all right. And like how to get the most out of an internship? As you said that
Okay.
internships help.
Right. So internships actually help you a lot. And uh, so when you do your internship, you're actually under a manager, or your mentee, or your mentor, and you can actually ask them a lot of questions, and on what you're doing and what you want to do as part of that internship. Apart from that, in order to get the most of it, uh, it's really great to network a lot and connect to a lot of people within your company, and try to understand like what kind of work that they do, and is there anything that you can help them out with. And yeah, other and other kind of questions. So in my internship, I did my internship at BlackRock, my final year internship, and yeah, we had this hackathon, and I had to network with a lot of people who were already in the US, and also with and another person who was in another team on the data and AI team. So it was really helpful because I got to know that I got to know that the data and AI team, a little bit about the data and AI team, even though I was in the um, client end reporting team. Yeah, so that was
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really great to network, I would say, and
Hmm.
connect with a lot of people.
Okay, fine. Yeah. So, do we need to also email the professors for MS?
Um, so I would say the emailing step would come right after you get your acceptance letter. So it's better to wait for your acceptance letters and then shoot them an email, because to be honest, they hardly look at emails, and they're already quite busy. And yeah, so after you get in, it's really important to highlight like which program you are in, and um, if if their research actually excites you, and oh, yeah, if you want to really work under them and whatnot. So um, so it's better to inform them after you get in. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And like, how does one choose a university? Like, what are the steps to
Um,
be done?
Yeah, so in order to choose a university, people usually they first look at the rankings, and after you look at the rankings, then you try to look at uh, I think there's a website called csrankings.org or .com, where you can actually see based on your specialization of which university is like the best based on the publications that they do. And it's really important to see that. And after you see what kind of research they do, important to see important to see what kind of professors uh, do that particular type of research. And yeah, after you get to know that, you want to see that whether it's appropriate for you to work under them, because there are some professors that actually expect a lot from you. So it's important to
Yeah.
uh, it's important to look at that as well. And yeah, in order to choose a university, I would say the first step would be to go on something like csrankings.com, and then
Right.
look for your
Yeah.
preferred specialization, and shortlist like maybe 5 or 6 universities, and then have a look at the professors that work in that particular area, and and read a few works on them, and and then apply to it if it feels fit for you.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, yeah. So, since we all know that it's quite expensive to go for higher studies abroad, so many people take educational loans. So,
Yeah.
how do you think one can plan to repay these educational loans?
So a lot of people actually who want to go for masters, they usually work for 2 or 3 years back in India, and then they do a masters. So when they work, they actually have some kind of savings already set up. So you can actually cover a part of your loan using that. But otherwise, after you graduate from your masters, it's really important to work for like 2 or 3 years so that you can repay your loan. And yeah, I think that can be done out here really well, because the cost of the cost of living and everything is high, but your salary also meets your expectations on the basis of that. So you will have uh, you will have a really good savings by the end of 2 or 3 years. That's enough to repay your loan.
Yeah, okay. So, can you tell us the difference between classes at CMU and here at India?
Okay, that's a really good question. So the classes at CMU are, yeah, they're like 1 hour 40 minutes long. First of all, and then in India it was like just 1 hour long. But I don't really mind that, and because it's really exciting, and also, yeah, the topics that they teach are quite collaborative in nature. So, so one of our classes, the professor actually wants us to make small groups and then discuss about some particular problem that's associated with privacy, and then we convene for like we convene and discuss for like 10 minutes, and then we come back with some solutions and whatever we discussed. So it's really important to have these discussions, and we have these discussions right there in the middle of class. So that's something that I noticed that was different from the Indian colleges, because they don't really expect you to discuss within your classmates and all, but they just want to answer your questions
Yeah,
and
yeah.
whatnot. Yeah, so that was a really good, um, yeah, a really good step up. And also, yeah, and also the whatever mathematics also that I'm learning right now, it's very different from the whatever I learned back in India.
Mhm.
A lot of people are actually struggling in the math related courses because um, yeah, because in India what happens is that you you actually have advanced, you have done a lot of advanced maths. Calculus is it's considered as advanced maths, so so you can actually help out other people in your course because uh, yeah, Indians are supposed to be like, Asians are supposed to be really good at math related areas, so so machine learning and whatnot. Yeah, so that was really important.
Yes,
And
okay. Mm.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And since you're a research engineer at OpenMind, so can you tell us how does one get into research?
That's also a really good question. In order to get into research, it's really important to have a good mentor. So, so having a mentor actually helps you to get started with research. I actually wasn't into research until the pandemic started, and it took me like nearly 4 or 5 months to just get my first paper out there. So,
Mhm.
just imagine like 4 or 5 months, like working for like 16 to 18 hours per day. And yeah, it was really helpful. And yeah, it was quite painful also because yeah, because it was the first time I was doing research. And I had a really good mentor who was also a graduate from CMU in the 2020 batch, and he helped me a lot with all my silliest doubts and the craziest doubts that I ever had on related to
Right.
machine learning. So I didn't feel any inferior complex as such. So it's really good to have mentors like that who could actually help you and guide you. They can kind of guide you through the entire research process. Yeah, and it took me like 4 to 5 months
Mhm.
to actually come up with a really good output. And yeah, it took me like 2 or 3 months just to understand his earlier paper.
Mhm.
So my mentor's earlier paper was, um, yeah, he had a paper at CVPR at one of the workshops. So it took me like 2 or 3 months just to understand this paper. But once I was able to grasp it, uh, it became really easy uh, to work on my implementation and yeah, whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah, so it is really important to have good mentors.
Yeah, it's really important to have
Mhm.
good mentors.
Yeah, and how does one secure a research internship?
Okay, so I would not be the best person to answer this because I haven't done any research internships.
Okay. Mhm.
And the best way to do this is you first really need to have a good CGPA for a research internship. So just watch out on that. And
Yeah, yeah.
apart from that, you also want to contact the professor and
Mm.
by email, saying that you're really interested in their works and you've read their works. And if you do have any suggestible directions that you want to pursue, that's
Mhm.
also a really good, yeah, it gives you an edge over other applicants. So it's important to highlight these points.
Yeah, all right. So, how important is writing during research?
So I would say the writing stage is really not that important. It comes to it. That would be towards the end of the project. So the first step would be to run your experiments and try to see whether the theory that you have is complies with your practicals. That is with your experiments. And If it does not, then yeah, then your entire project is, if you already started writing and
Mm.
your experiments do not comply with your theory, it's yeah, it's a waste of your time, right? And
Yeah.
this usually happens a lot
Mm.
in research, and it- it's yeah, and it's quite common for a PhD student to have these kind of things. But it's also really important to get back up on your horse, and then um, try to look for other directions as well. But
Yeah.
so that's why you usually leave the writing out towards the end, after you've done a few experiments, and you feel that there is some promise in that particular direction.
Okay, all right. So, what is the most important thing while tackling a research problem?
So the most important thing would be uh, to look up for I would say literature review is really important, because by understanding what works that have come behind the scenes, that is behind your particular research direction, actually sets a tone for your research. And if you know what kind of works have already come out earlier, that would be that would actually help you in your particular research direction. And also so I would say after literature review, it would be great to look at some of the theory aspects of it as well. Once you've looked at the theory and you come up with maybe something like add a new regularization term or something. And yeah, it's really important to run some experiments related to that, and whether you actually get better results than the state of the art methods. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And how important is programming in research?
Programming, it depends on what research you're doing. So if you're in CS, obviously if programming is really important. And yeah, even in ECA also sometimes programming is important. But if you look at something like psychology or behavioral sciences, coding is not that important.
Okay.
So it depends on your field.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so like, what should my resume look like if I want to apply for higher studies?
Okay, so your resume would first want to highlight your previous background and your motivation, saying that what your research interests are.
Mm.
And after that, yeah, you try to explain your past experiences on where you worked, where you interned, and so on.
Okay.
Once you've done that, you would want to highlight some of the projects or publications that you've done, and any open source projects that you contributed to and whatnot. And then the next one would be extracurricular activities, as in if you're part of some other open source community, or um, yeah, or if you're doing something like gardening or planting seeds and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah, so in which year did you start preparing for like higher studies abroad? And
Um,
what, according to you, is the correct time to start preparing?
so Yeah, I started out quite late. That is once the pandemic started. I was in my third year,
Mm.
and uh, yeah, so that's when I started doing research. I thought that since I didn't have a really good GPA, I had to cover it up with my research, and that's what I did. And yeah,
Like,
sorry,
so
could
what,
you?
according to you, when is the correct time to start preparing?
Okay, yeah. So the correct time would be the third year, or maybe even the second year would be really helpful. Like after your fifth sem, no, after
Mm.
your fifth or sixth sem, it's really important uh, to give your first shot at your GRE, because GRE, if you leave it out towards the end, uh, it would be really hectic, and then you really don't want to stress yourself on that. And it's better to give it out as soon as possible, because your GRE is valid for 5 years. Yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, if you already have a good score uh, by the start of fourth year, that's really good.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so how important are extracurricular activities in higher studies, and what all did you do to add to your profile?
Yeah, my extracurricular activities were Um, yeah, I used to do gardening and planting back in my high school, and then I also play a lot of sports. Like I
Okay.
play badminton and football.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, I
So
mentioned
does this
those
add
in
to
my.
your profile? Like,
Yeah, I would say it does because I have
mm,
mentioned this in my SOP as well, saying that yeah, that I was interested in participating and also participating in inter-school activities, or maybe uh, trying to join the team out here, that is the CMU badminton team, or something.
right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I mentioned that in my SOP, and I think that that really does help because it's good to research a little more on that, and you try to see where the collegiate teams actually play and where do they actually stand in the rankings and what not. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So has COVID-19 affected the way people think about their higher studies now?
That's again a good question. Yeah, I think it has because right now, in order to do higher studies, it's really important to get your visa on time, and that was really shaky because um, when I applied, people were saying that this the first sem was going to be online, and then I was really under the impression of not attending offline classes, and that was something that I really didn't want to do because yeah, because having the remote experience is not the best time. So yeah, actually COVID-19 has affected our lives a lot, and yeah, it's important to get back up, but and also yeah, getting into. So you're saying that higher studies, COVID-19, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it actually has impacted a lot of our lives, and uh, yeah, it's really important that you consider that aspect as well, because your financials actually have usually have people have lost out a lot on their businesses. So it's important to keep that in mind as well when you apply to for a master's program. So yeah, taking a loan and whatever that you want to take. It- yeah. So
All right. So we also wanted to know what are the job perspectives after an MS abroad.
yeah, so for job prospects, there are a lot of startups out here, and so a lot of startups also want to hire new grads, and yeah, there are a lot of opportunities, especially for SWE or SDE roles, and yeah, mostly related to coding, I would say. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. So is there a specific way to communicate with an international audience?
Um, so could you rephrase that question? I didn't quite understand that.
Yeah. So like the culture is different, right?
Okay, right,
So
yeah.
yeah. So how do you
Okay,
communicate? Yeah.
I see. So yeah, diversity plays a really key role out here, and a lot of people, uh, yeah, a lot of people in CMU are come from different backgrounds. So that in order to communicate with them, it's really important to understand like what kind of background they come from, and then you try to simple down and break things uh, into easy stuff, so that so that everyone in your team or everyone you're
Hmm.
talking to understands. So that's one thing um, that's really important out here, and because people come from different backgrounds, like in my program there's
Yeah.
one who comes from a musical background, and then uh, another who comes from a computational yeah, a computational social sciences background. So it's important to include everyone in your conversations.
Yeah. Okay. So it is said that getting admission is easy, but it is really difficult to get a scholarship. Is it true?
Yes, that's actually quite true. And getting a scholarship, especially for an international student, it's really hard. And and when you're applying for prestigious colleges, your chances really go down to really minimal. Really they go down, like you might get like a 0.5% chance of actually getting some kind of scholarship. And especially for master students, I mean, for PhD students, there are a lot of opportunities, a lot of fellowships that can actually fund your program. So yeah, in that prospect, a PhD is better than a master's. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And can you recommend some websites where we can study for GRE and TOEFL and IELTS and such exams?
Right. So I would say for GRE, Magoosh GRE is really good, I've heard. And yeah, there is also something called Greg Matt on YouTube that is really
Okay.
good. Yeah.
Mhm.
And for IELTS also, there are a few channels on YouTube that are really good. And I would suggest you to have a look at them.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, okay. So this finally concludes the Q&A session. And
Okay.
moving on, let us advance to the next segment by opening the floor for a Q&A session by the audience. So I request the audience to kindly post your questions in the comment section. Yeah, so it is there on your screen. So
Okay. So is it worth doing masters given that we need to invest so much, and also given that we have so many courses online nowadays? That's a good question again. It, it is actually worth doing a master's. It kind of gives you that stepping stone in order to jump up your career, and your prospects after doing a master's actually, yeah, are actually high in order to get into a good job. So if you want to do a really good job after your master's, it's important to have a graduate degree. And yeah, because a lot of companies right now require have preferred qualifications as either a master's or a PhD degree. So having a master's is always, yeah, it's good to have a degree like that under your belt. And given that we have so many courses online nowadays, yeah, so a lot of courses are online nowadays, and having offline classes are really helpful because you can kind of collaborate, um, and also speak to a lot of other students in your classes. So in my classes there are there is something called a team project that you have to do
yeah,
and submit by the end of the semester. And you cannot do that when it's remote, right? It's really hard to actually get everyone together on a Zoom call and uh, discuss everything, because maybe people come from different time zones and whatnot. So having people at one place, that is for offline classes, it is really helpful because you can kind of communicate with them, and uh, you can fix a time and place to discuss your projects and other ideas.
yeah,
So that's really helpful.
mm, yeah,
How to find the right course to take up in the masters? Again, a good question. That actually depends on your research, what you do. So what I mean by this research is that you want to see what kind of programs are offered by different universities. And I think every university offers a course that is related to computer science, or information technology. So it's really important to see what kind of professors also teach those courses, and if their research actually interests you, and yeah, if you really want to get into that college.
yeah, all right. So yeah, next question.
Okay, if you have publications in a field which is not directly related to the field which I'm. Yeah, I think it does. I was talking to a lot of people, and people who come from different backgrounds as well. There's one person in my program. He used to do computational social sciences. That is, he used to look at behavioral sciences of how political ads actually affect. Uh, yeah, they affect the internet or something like that, affect your privacy and whatnot. So Yeah, and then he also he got into my program, so it wasn't actually related to that field. It was more towards the behavioral sciences side, and showing that you do have the aptitude for research actually helps.
Yeah, all right. So thank you so much, sir. You really gave a great insights today. And so now, as we have come to the end of this event, I would like to thank Mr. Rakshit Naidu for sparing his valuable time in educating and empowering us with information which will help us in our academic journey. And special thanks to our audience for being attentive as well as interested towards this event and making it a grand success. I'm sure all of you will take home some powerful key ideas on how to foster the necessary change. So we would love to see you all again in our forthcoming events. So thank you so much and have a great evening.
Yeah, thank you so much. Had fun being here. Bye.
Yeah, have a great
Yeah,
day ahead.
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.